Great. Call to order, 7 o'clock. That's great. I don't see any members of the public, except Jessica, and we know why you're here, which is great. Thank you. The December 5th meeting minutes, I sent those out right after the meeting, so hopefully everybody got a chance to look at those. Anybody have any comments, questions?
I'm trying to call them back up again right now. Oh, yeah. I mean, I looked at them when I did them and then.
You didn't have any visceral reaction at the time?
No, I did not.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion?
So move.
Diane moved,
I'll second that.
Mike second. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Good
So,
on.
great. Okay, so today our plan is to talk a little bit more about the list. Do you want to pull that up? Okay, I just sent it today. I emailed it. This thing does not.
They're terrible chairs.
Okay. I feel like the chair rolls really well,
These are new, right?
but then it like hits a certain
No?
spot, and I don't know if it's like, you know, when you get the shopping cart where you're like going along and then all of a sudden it like
Yeah.
takes you away. That's what these wheels are like. I'm like, I roll to a certain point and it's all good, and then it's just goes sideways, and I'm like, what's happening here?
Yeah, no, these green ones were cast offs from the National Bank of Middlebury.
No, they don't have the arms either. I think that's just weird. You get slouchy position.
I think that the
Yes.
executive gets the arms. Anyway, so yeah, so I'm not drunk. I just have wonky wheels. I told Hallie that I did have dinner before I came, but I was eating a lot of Oreos, not, I wasn't drinking. All right, and anyway, that's probably enough. Okay, so there we go. I killed enough time and we got that.
I got you.
All right, so this is the list from last time, but what I've done is I've added some highlighting to start some of our conversation. So if we can not get in the weeds yet with the column D, but what I want to do is just first talk about the ones that are highlighted in gray. So the ones that are highlighted in gray, I'm going to propose that we discuss taking off the list. Totally open to your pushback on this, but let me tell you why. So I want to start from the bottom. So you see the first thing that's highlighted in gray is the Community Care Fund. It was a suggestion. It's a terrific idea that we set money aside for people in the community having an emergency. That is not something we can do with ARPA funds. I think that we should take it off. So do you guys want to do these one at a time, or do you want me to tell you all my reasoning first?
Let's blast through them all.
Keep going.
Well, wait, how do you know that ARPA funds cannot be used for that?
Because I asked. Some of the things that way back at our very beginning meeting, one of the things that I asked was, can we put the money in an investment so that we can use the interest into the future to use for, needs of this type? And the answer is a hard no on that. And the other thing was, can we just give the money directly to people? And that was like, no, like you could, the town could use it for emergency pay. But I think what they can't do is say, we're going to give it to a subset of people. So they could say, the people in need. They could give it to emergency responders, or they could give it to police who worked through COVID, so they could give it to people who provided COVID relief or did something. But I don't think that what we can't do is create a fund.
Correct.
So we could give it to people, but we can't create a fund. And the other thing is that not only are we not allowed to create a fund to use in the future, but this also would be something that require oversight, and somebody would have to manage it, receive the requests, consider it. And I think that would be an awkward thing for certainly the town administrator or the select board to put themselves in as being the arbiter of who in the community needs money. There may be other agencies or organizations who could do that. I mean, I know, for example, all of the area churches have a community fund that, that parishioners or community members can give money to, and then the pastor can give the money out. But I just, I think it's a tricky one for us. So I don't know, let's do it one at a time. What do we
Okay.
think about that one?
I think from a logistics standpoint, it has to come off. And our hands are pretty tight on that.
Mhm. And there's other things covering that, if that need. I mean, we've got to eliminate some.
I don't know if we do or not, but anyway, well, I'll entertain a motion, if you guys want to.
I'll make a motion to eliminate the community care fund from the list.
Anybody second?
Second,
Any discussion?
no, we already have it.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. Did Rob raise his hand?
I think so.
Did you raise your hand, Rob?
Also,
Okay,
Only as an eye.
okay. Okay, next one that's gray on the list is the pool. We don't have an estimate for the pool. We don't know who would build it or where it would go. We already have a pool in town, and this would be a great big ongoing expense. I think it would use up a lot of our money, and I'm proposing that we take it off.
I agree.
I agree wholeheartedly.
We have wonderful rivers that people can.
Okay, so we have a first and a second again. Who wants to argue back on that one?
I feel, I mean, it just seemed like it was something that the community was really interested in. I mean, I don't know where we would put it. I'm not sure of any of those things. However, the idea of it seemed really awesome. So, I mean, I can't argue it. I don't have any facts or figures to support my claim of keeping it on there. Otherwise, other than just, wow, wouldn't that be cool if we could have a pool that we had access to during the summer months, and we could have swim lessons for all children. It's a big equity piece in the state that every, you know, in these 5 towns, yes, there's one in
We
Virginia,
can
but
have swim lessons at Mount April. That's where they used to have them.
They stopped during COVID, but
Yeah, but they have swim lessons there.
they have some. It's not a lot. There's not a lot of accessibility to the Mount A pool.
And
At
that's
this
a
point.
bigger issue.
Yeah.
And so one thing we can do is very similar to when we talked about housing, is that this was when we presented to the select board, this was an item that had a lot of community interest. We don't feel like this is the right funding mechanism for such. And then we would recommend that they put together a exploratory committee and go down
Yes.
that road, but it's outside of our scope and scale.
By a lot of community support. Where did you hear that?
Do the outreach that we did,
Oh, yeah.
it was a
it came up.
At the spaghetti dinner, you know, a woman approached me about that, and then she went and wrote on every single one of those pieces of paper. And so.
Some may have
and he
looked
kept going. He had a lot of interest in it, and a couple of her friends, but I didn't hear much else.
No, we saw probably, say, a half a dozen or more people do the postcard drop off, the comic cards.
Yeah.
And at different times too, so it wasn't
We
like,
have a bunch of them, yeah.
But it is a big ongoing
Well,
expense.
Yeah.
And to your point, Chris, you know, one of the things that's also on our agenda tonight is to talk about the way we make our recommendations to the select board. And so anything that we take off this list tonight, I think will be, so we have this list, then we have our second tier. Anything we take off this list tonight, I think has a narrative section in between those 2 tiers that says, these would have been on our first list, but they're not, and here's why. But we want to make sure you see them, select board, and you know that these are things important to the community. So, you know, we're not going to like flush it down the toilet,
Okay.
and we're not even going to bury it. We're just going to take it off of this list, and then, you know, it'll be an intermediary thing. So to your point, we can say to the select board, the things on this list are things that you should look into, how they look into it, when they look into it, over what time period, but not ARPA funds per se.
I can only imagine the expense of actually putting it
Oh, I
in.
know.
It's going to
Right.
would
Yeah.
use a lot of money.
Yeah,
I
that's
think-
actually one of the other considerations for taking these off the list is, could it happen in the time frame of
Mhm.
ARPA funds?
No,
And
it wouldn't.
the idea of, you know, all of the planning, the engineering, the siting, and the fundraising, yeah, I think it's tricky, so. Okay, so I wrote you
Okay.
down as motion and you as second, because you
Sure.
guys both jumped in. Any other discussion? All in favor of taking this off this list?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
I go with I am an I. I'm sorry. I decided.
You're saying aye? You're
I
not
am,
saying-
because the fact that it can be like
Still
off and
suggested.
still suggested with some information, and I like that idea, so it's not, like you said, it's not just flushed down the toilet. There can be further conversations amongst the select board if it's something that they want to pursue.
Yeah.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you, I like
It could be
that.
like a 10-year project.
Yeah, I'm
exactly,
sure,
Which
yeah.
would be great, and I agree with you on the equity analysis.
Mhm.
Okay, so the next one is this idea of the farmer's market, local ag support, community garden, and forgive me, but I also lumped in buying the land on West Street that's available. So the reason that I think we should talk about this and either take it off or at least be more clear what we mean is threefold. First, 2 of the 3 parcels on that West Street have been sold.
Yeah,
So
so
there's
there's West Pleasant.
It is
West Pleasant,
yes,
yes, yeah, thank you, West Pleasant.
Yep.
So there's only 1 parcel left.
Oh, which
Um,
parcel is left?
The
I
one-
don't,
Oh,
The one that's closest to
The building.
Giselle's house, which is the White House.
okay.
So her property abuts that
Yeah.
lot.
So that
It's
can't be a
anywhere
very
east of
big
Wall.
lot.
No, it's 0.33.
Yeah, it's a little quarter-acre lot. It's a typical
Yeah.
village lot.
so there's only 1 left there. Furthermore, you know, the first thing we heard all over all of our things was housing,
I know.
and we need housing.
Mhm.
There is a community garden. It's no longer in the village, but it's still very well supported, and it's pretty close to the village now,
Mhm.
down on Hewitt. So I feel like the idea of a community garden, the idea of the land on West Street, we should take off of the table, which then leaves the other related ideas of, you know, reigniting a farmer's market or trying to come up with some way for local ag support. I feel if we want to leave the local ag support on there, we need to try to give a little more guidance to the select board about what that means. And I went back through the notes and there really wasn't anything very detailed about that. If we want them to look into a farmer's market, or if we want to set money aside to get a farmer's market started, that would be fine, except that that would be an ongoing expense. And how would that be funded in the future? So my proposal is that we, at a minimum, take off the community garden and the land on West Street. And
Absolutely.
then that as a committee, you guys tell me whether you feel like we should have something in here that's going to try to support local farmers or our farm community, and how we want to try to let that be represented to the select board, or do we want to just move that down like with the pool and say, here's a thing we think is important. We don't really have anything for it. We encourage you to look into it. But I'm open to ideas. I'm not saying we should take the whole thing off. I just want to make sure we take off the land and community garden piece
100%.
and then see about that. So thoughts, people.
You know, as soon as you said the affordable housing or housing crisis, yes, there's a piece there, so somebody could buy it and put up a house just like they did on Maple Street. Yeah, so I agree
Yeah, it's
with
one of the
that.
few building lots that are available in the village right now.
Does anyone know how well used the community garden space on Hewitt Lane is? Is anyone talking? I can't hear anyone. You're muted.
Let's retry again. Helen, can you hear?
Now, oh, briefly.
Yes. Okay. Huh, strange internet. Can you raise your hands if you can hear me? Yes, okay, good. Okay, so it is very well used. I don't know if it's full, because I don't know if Jono has a like a limit on that space, because it's a pretty big space. But I do know that it's very actively used and people have been pleased. Apparently the soil is really amazing.
Okay, so my other thought on that, on this whole line item, is that one of the points in the article in the last Addison Independent from Jessica's students was mental health issues and mental health concerns that arose during COVID, lockdown, quarantine, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm looking through this list, and I think that needs to be addressed, and I think we should do something, if not whatever we can, to try to help out on that issue. I don't think that most of the other things on this list address that at all. AC for Holly Hall, Mason's Elevator, Rescue Squad, none of these have anything to do with mental health for the citizens of Bristol. And therefore, I thought the pool, which actually could be a very good community center, lots of activity, fun, relaxation, great. Farmers market, a chance to interact with friends and neighbors. Okay, so if we eliminate those, the only thing left that might encourage neighborly interaction is the skate park. So I just want to make a plea for not ignoring that aspect of ARPA and the consequences of COVID. I don't want to see all of these funds used for infrastructure that do nothing for the majority of Bristol residents who are seeking ways to get back the community aspects that they feel have been lost.
I think there are many things left on the list that meet that need of community input and community.
Can you hear, Helen?
Yeah, I think there are many things. So when you say, you know, there's nothing left, I don't think that's true.
So what can you point to?
Uh,
Well, the rescue squad upgrades would help them respond to mental health needs.
Yeah.
Turning point is addiction, which is under the mental health category.
Yeah.
Accessibility on the trails, the pedestrian path along Pine Street. The Mason's Elevator, the rationale for that is to
Piece of
increase
programming.
yeah, that's.
programming for seniors who have been locked in absolutely next to the kids, the second largest devastated group.
Yeah, it's a needy population.
The classroom at the library is to provide additional programming, which is more opportunities for participation. A dog park is also a social thing. And then the recreation ones, the bike racks, the ice rink. I hear your point, and I made a note while you were talking, Helen, that I think that that's also something that should go in the narrative, is like what's missing. And I think that mental health is a point to be added to that narrative, to say, like, here's something that, you know, is an issue and a need and wasn't addressed by the ideas that we got directly, and should be kept in mind.
And I'm not sure about the statement that community interaction or whatever has been lost. Why would someone say that? Bristol's a very active group thing.
Well, we used to have a farmer's market and we no longer do.
So it failed. Yeah, it only ran one season. And it didn't support. And it's difficult, you know, somebody would have to take charge. I understand that it's nobody's fault, but it didn't work. There weren't enough vendors, people didn't come.
Well, maybe that's part of the narrative, like in the summertime, there's the music on the green with the food. Maybe somehow a farmer's market gets tied into there too, since there's something already happening there. So maybe that is a narrative saying there's some ideas to carry that forward. Because if you already have individuals that are participating in something there, would that be a cause for other people to be, oh, I'm going to sell my goods here, my produce or what have you, because there's already individuals at the green. I mean, I don't even know if it's going to be happening then, but that was really great.
It was.
We got a lot of people out.
Too.
It was successful.
Well, I mean, could we leave farmer's market on the list with, you know, a nominal amount, $5,000 or $10,000, and encourage the select board to figure out how to support local farmers or encourage them to make connections with buyers, and whether they do that by, even if it's just a one-off, whether they give it to Bristol Core and try to get them to hire somebody to run a summer farmers market, or give it to a local farmer, and see if that person will spearhead
Or Crooked Ladle, who's actually running the
Monday night
Monday
things.
night thing. So yeah, I have no problems leaving it that. Like I said, put a $5-10 grand at it, and with that expectation that this is seed money to rekindle that program.
Yeah,
How and where, we don't know.
it may take a group. Maybe there's just a group of citizens who are really interested and they could pull it together.
I'd be good with that.
So, but we leave it farmer's market and local ag support. Like the point of the farmer's market is not just so that community members can buy healthy food. It's also so that we're supporting our local farmers and giving them added marketing opportunity.
And big piece of that is finding out how many of the local farmers actually want to do it again. That was one of the things that Joe ran into when she ran it previously in town, is it was hard finding. Yeah, it was hard finding. I mean, when best time for the farmer's market is harvest time. It's when they have the least amount of time. So I think it would be great to have a marker there with the expectation of, hey, if this could work, we have some funds set aside that it could be applied to that. Is that in that manner?
No question, like how there's the Peace Garden, that's run solely by volunteers, is that correct? So
Yeah.
maybe this is something like that. Do we, during town meeting, give money to the Peace Garden or no?
No,
So it's just a
it
volunteer
was a
run
group
thing
that was interested.
that
in doing
really
it.
wanted it to happen, so maybe there is.
There is money on the budget, I believe.
Okay,
Really?
Like when something, like if bench rots,
okay.
I believe
but
that.
I think that they get their own plans.
Yeah. That's.
All right, so does that feel, I mean, I want to capture the spirit, Helen, of your point to make sure that I think even more importantly than just not taking out the farmer's market and the local ag is that we do highlight mental health for something we want to see the select board keep on their radar screen. But if we put an amount in here and encourage them to focus on trying to find somebody to reignite that, but we set aside the community garden and the land on Pleasant Street, does that feel like it addresses the spirit of what you're hoping to see? Yes, you
No,
got it.
okay.
Okay. So can I hear a motion?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we strike the Union Garden land on West Pleasant Garden from item 54 and leave the farmer's market with $5,000.
I second.
Further discussion? All in favor? So the next gray one is the public restrooms. This makes our town employees nervous is an understatement, Allison. I was not able to get any figures for it, so I don't have an estimate of how much it would cost. I feel like this is one that I personally put in. I just feel like it's an equity issue. I feel like it's really important. But it's possible that we could resolve this somewhat with signage, letting people in the community know where they can access bathrooms through local businesses or municipal buildings during the day. And that might be a step in that direction. And I'd be willing to, let this be in the narrative that goes to the select board to say like, hey, this is an equity issue. If you want to be an equitable community in the long run, this is a big deal, and have them think about it. But I'm not feeling like we have enough. I just feel like it's a big black hole. And I know that it's going to be hard for our community leaders to get behind at this point. So that's why I was suggesting that we demote it to a narrative recommendation rather than yes.
Absolutely.
I know because you were one of the people who were like,
Because the public restroom, while it sounds great, the downside to it is it goes against one of the things we talked about not
Yes.
wanting. It's going to be an ongoing, expensive venture with no funding mechanism after year one when we build it.
well, it's particularly tricky too, like as a municipality that doesn't have a sewer system. Yeah. So, but I mean, I think
But downtown.
they have a collective septic.
Yeah.
So I think that if we demote it to a narrative thing, and include the idea of leaving a portalet on or near the park year round, or maybe finding someplace on the park or near the park where we could make build something that would be a little more aesthetic to put the portalet in, as a recommendation, but I don't know. Anyway, that's where I am. You do whatever you want with the people, but that's where I came to it. I was just like, I think I need to let that. Thoughts?
Well, just leave a portalet, I guess, and then someone would have to.
Well, yeah, if you get a portalet, then the monthly fee you
Oh,
pay,
I
they,
see.
they service it once a week, they
Yeah.
stock it, they clean it.
I see.
We do that at the rec park now. We leave a handicap accessible portalet, sort of, 3 season.
What's the monthly?
I don't know. No, I'm sure.
Is it, sorry, are you finding that people are respectful with it?
Yeah, respectful enough. And it does get serviced once a week, so.
So just from my history of field, and you all have had the luxury of dealing with that, it wasn't respected. It was tipped over on a regular basis. And the horror story I've got for you is one day went over, pushed it back up, as I'm walking up to the door, opens, 2 little kids come calling out, covered in blue.
They had been in it when it got tipped.
And so I'm expecting them, like, what are you doing? Like, this is the coolest playhouse. So, yeah, so there's nothing better than standing ankle deep and writing one of these things.
Nice.
Just,
Well, anyway, back to our thing. Would you like to make the motion to take it out?
sure, I mean, I'll make a motion to restrict the public restrooms list at this point.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor? You opposed? Okay. Is it important that we have this be a consensus?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. I think this is the first time this has happened, so I don't know how I put this.
Well, you can say one declination or whatever.
Yeah.
One day.
Or there's 6 of us, so it's 5 days, 1 night,
2.
7. So
Do
it's,
I vote?
so it's 6
All right.
and 1.
Thanks for helping me work through that. Alright. Next one on the possible takeoff is affordable housing, senior housing. We've had this on here, but we don't have anything for it. So I think it's just gotta go, and I don't even think we need a motion because we just don't have anything there.
I'm sorry, I missed it. Affordable senior.
It says affordable housing / senior housing.
There is senior housing on that.
Yeah.
But I mean, this came up as like,
I
everybody
know,
says we
it comes
need it,
up
but there's
over,
not
it
an
comes
actual
up
proposal,
with
right?
everyone.
So I think we just put it in the narrative
I
and
think
say
people
like,
don't have that awareness that there is.
And I thought we left our last meeting, that's what we were doing with the housing aspect of it was. Same, it was like the mental health and the housing, we know it's a problem, but we can't fix it with this. I mean, a million and change
Not in
doesn't
this
fix
time period, that's.
window and a dollar, didn't fix the problem.
so we good with just letting that one go? I don't think we need to vote because there's nothing to vote on. Okay, and then the last one is solar panels on the town or school properties, make the town electric, bury power lines. Ian Albinson wasn't able to make the last meeting, but he had read the minutes and this list, and he said, just wanted to make sure that we knew that the town has a significant buy-in to the solar panels on 116 South, and so the town, the municipality, like our town government, covers their electric costs through solar already. And that the select board is committed to putting solar panels on any new town constructed buildings moving forward. So from a town standpoint, there's that. And then he pointed out that we have no control over what happens on the school properties. So we could recommend that to the school, and that's a good idea, but that's not, unless we're gonna spend our town ARPA monies to put solar panels on Mount A Union School District. Exactly. There was that, and then I don't know about the Berry property lines or Berry power lines, but we don't have an estimate on that. So I just wanted to make sure I communicated that information. Doesn't mean we need to take this off the list, but we just might want to be more clear about it, what we would like to see. If we feel like it's important to bury the power lines, we should probably kind of figure out what that looks like cost-wise. But it sounds like the town is, moving in the right direction already with solar for their own electric needs. So we should make a recommendation to the school and then decide what we want to do with the bury the power lines thing.
I mean, personally, I'm not sure what buried power lines gives.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
what is that? I mean, they don't fall down in the wind. What else?
It's aesthetic.
It's aesthetics.
Yeah.
Well,
And before we bury the power lines need to be upgraded.
I think there are more important. Not
You
just
make,
in burying
you
the
want to make a
power.
motion to take the whole deal off?
Sure.
All of line 57, which is the solar panels, school properties, and buried power lines.
Yeah, I guess we take the whole line out.
Sure.
Other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the ones in yellow are just highlighted because they had something to do with housing, childcare, or transportation, which were our top three. And I say housing because Wren's Nest got in touch with me last week, and they are amending their proposal. So remember, they had come to us with a proposal to build facilities so that they could be more permanently based and expand their childcare. And one of the things that they're now amending that proposal to do is to include 2 housing units to house childcare workers. Because one of the things that they've had trouble with is that they have in the past gotten funding for an AmeriCorps worker to work in their childcare, but then the AmeriCorps person didn't come because they couldn't find housing. So she was like, I hope that's not going to make our proposal no longer be valid to you. And I was like, well, I can't speak for the committee, but I think it would probably make it even more attractive because it's would add 2 units of housing to the community.
And I think I read their proposal at some point, but
They
how
sent it.
much are they asking for? And
They had asked us for $200,000. I said, how much more would you need? She said, probably double that. I randomly put in 300,000 here because so we're not going to give you half our money, but so
and how big is their childcare now?
I don't remember.
They don't have running water or electricity. So they're gonna build someplace.
Yes, they have a contract on a land. Do they have a contract on that? And so they're making an application to the state for ARPA money for childcare. And they are using our money or hoping to use our money as a matching grant. So this hits all of our boxes. It leverages additional money to the community. It addresses childcare and housing. I think it's our biggest ticket item, but I think that's fine. Anyway, so that's why those are yellow. I just wanted, because I was going through to say, do we have any programs? Like, is there anything on here that does housing, childcare, or transportation? And those are the ones that did something anyway.
So one update on the bus shelters. I think we can strike that from the list altogether. Myself and Valerie have been working with the group to potentially have 3 bus shelters for the community.
Right.
So
And Ian and I actually followed up on that for Valerie while she was out with Mary Claire. But we will have to put in the pads or prepare the things. So where is that? Yeah, so we put in 15,000 for if there needs to be site work or concrete. They have to be accessible. So, if there's a sidewalk, there has to be. Anyway, but yeah, I think that we're gonna get the bus shelters.
oh yeah, cool.
Great.
So I want to return to childcare. with Bristol Family Center, a line item here, as well as Wren's Nest. And I'm just wondering if we have any idea what the need is. Is providing funding for both of these excessive?
Well, Bristol Family Center, they wanted money to upgrade their.
Sorry, didn't hear what you said.
They could take more children in if they had.
Right, so the Bristol Family Center's request was for a sprinkler system that would allow them to expand their space if they had the whatever approved sprinkler system is. So that would add more childcare. But the answer, Helen, is no, we wouldn't saturate the childcare market, we'd still be short. And particularly for infant. So because Wren's Nest isn't proposing infant care, Bristol Family Center does have infant care and they might be able to expand that somewhat. But so yeah, we still need it.
We don't have actual numbers. We just know that 82% of infants are likely to need childcare in Addison County. That's not broken down into that. Was from the Let's Grow Kids report. It's a huge number. 82% of our county needing infant care.
Okay, great. Thanks for addressing that.
So the next thing in conversation about this list is to move to column D, and just look at these wildly napkin sketched numbers. Okay, so just to be clear that none of these numbers is really very good. But to the extent that we have it, some of them are better than others. So the rescue quad upgrades is 130,000. That's from the horse's mouth. So that's actually from the rescue squad. The grant writing position, they put in at $50,000. And if we went ahead with that, you know, yes, we would be breaking our rule of an ongoing fund, but the idea would be that it might fund itself. Or
confused by that one so much. It's gonna fund itself. Why are we funding? I mean,
Well, because you need to have the person
Yes,
front
so-
year, because they have to write a grant for the next year, right? They're not gonna get a grant that retroactively pays them.
and they probably won't get a grant. So unlike academia,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
you write out a
Exactly.
proposal and you have a percentage of it for administration,
Yeah.
this wouldn't do that. But if the person was getting paid 50,000 and they wrote grants in excess of 100 or more, then they would essentially be funding their position, and it would be worthwhile. But that would be for the select board to decide. We have one skeptical face.
I'm not skeptical.
Keep up.
I just think it's I'm not certain why, how ARPA money, this is an ARPA issue, this is a pipe dream that a few folks have had, that they wanted to do this, and then there's the shoehorn it into the suggestion that, that's my only complaint with it. I get it, I mean, again, this is something the select board would have to approve,
Right.
so I mean,
I don't know if that's a fair characterization of this process.
No, but I'm.
Especially given the way that we all surveyed,
Yeah.
scored these surveys, and it's now the second highest
Yeah.
according to survey. So to suggest that it was like, I take a little bit concern with that.
Tongue in cheek.
it was more of that. I just thought
I
that.
see though, Chris, like, I feel like, the grant writing position can actually address a whole bunch of things that we're putting in our narrative and our tier two. So, you know, we're going to the select board and we're saying, we got 500 ideas. We've got 50 of them that we think are valid. We want you to fund 20. These 30 ideas, something ought to happen with those in the next 10 years. What are you going to do about that? And they're going to say, we're not going to do anything about it because we don't have any time. And Valerie's up to her eyeballs. And, you know, so I feel like funding the grant writing assistant, we say, we want you to do all 50 of these. Use the ARPA money on this, have that grant writer get their butt in gear and fund this. I see it as a way to bring a ton of money to town. And my concern would be, could we even find somebody who would do it? But if we could, so I know what you're saying, and I agree that we said we didn't want to do an ongoing thing, but I feel like this is one area where I think it could be a game changer, or not a game changer, more, I think it just could make our list get
get it done.
Right.
But anyway, that's me.
Well, what Ian said to me was, you know, it falls to him because nobody else really wants to do it, the grant writing, and that's not part of his job description, and he's very, very busy. You know, he does a lot of stuff for the
Well, a
town.
lot of volunteers write grants for the town. And they have
Yep,
for, I mean, you know,
oh,
time.
yep,
And so when you have volunteers who are able and willing to do that, it's awesome. And when you don't, oh, well,
well, but if you offered a position, maybe somebody would. take
that's
it.
what we could hope. I think it'd be
Worth a
awesome.
try.
And my other concern is, so we seeded with 50 grand. And it doesn't work, and it doesn't pan out.
Well,
I know it's,
sometimes that happens.
I know, the other things as I look at them here, it's like, these are things we know. As we look at them, that this X, Y, and Z, these things are actually gonna happen. We see things that. When it's done, this is, it might work. I just have
Could you say that within like a year if it's not?
Well,
Phil?
we'd only fund it for a year anyway.
that's all we
Yeah,
can
and then it
fund
would
it.
have to be budgeted.
But even within
would-
that year, if you can't, like, there's nobody to step up, that money would
Oh,
go
and then
somewhere
we'll just
else.
go back. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, so we'd lose it if we don't.
right, so where would we, yeah. I see what
Well,
you're
we
saying.
wouldn't use it because they could funnel it to some other thing. I mean, it's not like we'd actually lose the money. The money will get, it's, if they can't hire somebody, they'll go. Jessica's got her hand up. Sorry, I forget to look up there sometimes.
No worries. Normally I would 100% agree with Chris just because I hate funding like positions that are ongoing expenses with benefits and things like that out of grant funding like this. But in this particular case, it might actually be something good to do for the year. And I guess when I look at all of these ideas that we've come up with and that we plan to pass to the select board, we already know that ARPA funding is only going to fund a small portion of this, but they're really good ideas. And if we hired somebody to be a grant writer for the year, there's tons of money coming in right now through all these different programs. It's just hard for me to imagine that we have the capacity to apply for all of these grants. And so it might be worthwhile to think about this as an ARPA funded position to find funding for these extra ARPA ideas that we just can't fund through our limited funding. So that would be the only thing I would suggest, is that normally I would agree that you don't want a staff position, but in this case, it might be seen as sort of part of moving these ideas to the select board to say, let's also try to fund a position that can find all of these sources of funding, like the EV stations and things like that. We know that there's state and federal money coming in for that, broadband expansion, and to be able to have somebody write grants for the town of Bristol and divert some of that money to our community might be really helpful. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, or I'll just add, and even if it was just conceptualized, at least in that first year, is seeking matching funding for the things that the select board's trying to fund, right? I mean, these are back of the envelope calculations, but there's often overages. It go like if their job in that first year was, this is the list that we want, go find the extra money, right? I mean, it's even clear, even with our big ticket Rens Nest, right? Like even that's not enough, and they're using that to leverage other money. If I remember earlier, one of the things we wanted to do was try to leverage the funds. This is essentially paying somebody to leverage it for us. And it might not work. You're absolutely
That's
right.
true.
Right.
And again, it goes against one of
I hear what you're saying.
my very hardcore core things is an ongoing added expense to the community. And that's part of, I think, where I have the hardest time with this is it's not a one and done. I mean, yes, technically it is, we're just gonna dump 50 grand, but the following year it's picked up by the taxpayers. And that's where I have the hardest time with that. So that's my 2 cents on it. I'm good.
How do you want to go ahead? Do you want to, like when we voted to take things off, we said there was 1 nay. Do we want to just have a narrative that say, although we have concerns? Or do we want to make it stronger than that?
I think it's fine. I mean, I voiced my concern. The general consensus feels that it's gonna move forward, and I'm good with that. I was able to voice my concern.
Okay.
The next amount, I think that 55 came directly from Turning Point. It was a request that they made. They are getting other ARPA monies. But
Other towns.
From other towns, right? Didn't they
no,
ask?
but also from other sources, I think
As
other
well.
ARPA sources.
Oh,
that
okay.
allow. We can leave this money as is, and just let the select board deal with it as they may. But that was where that money came from. I've written in the 90,000 for Bristol Family Center, for their,
Can you type that in there now?
yeah,
Or no?
you can-
All
or
right.
I'll,
Was the turning point money for anything in particular, or just because they were asking for more money just as practice? Just, I mean,
Numbers.
I know it sounds terrible, but I know that they're on the line item on the town budget every year, and they asked everybody else, and I just couldn't remember if this was for
right.
something
And Rob,
special
you're
or
right,
just money.
they'll be on town meeting request as well. I think that they were saying that because addiction issues were so exacerbated by COVID, that they were seeking additional money. And I don't remember if it was for, more staff. I'm sorry, I don't
Well,
remember.
I can't remember that.
I don't think I read their proposal, but I talked to a couple of board members about it, and they, at that point, they were talking about, they need another building, their space isn't big enough, and so they were talking about buying the old St. Mary's elementary school, but it needed to be renovated, so they were trying to collect funds towards that. Now, maybe
I
there's
don't
other,
think this was
others too,
necessarily
yeah,
that,
it may
but I
not
don't
have been in the
remember.
proposal, but they, I mean, drug addiction is a terrible problem,
It is
even
a
in nice bucolic Bristol. It's
Yes, oh,
terrible,
for sure, yeah.
and we shouldn't minimize it.
And it's definitely been a COVID exacerbated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I say we just leave it. That's the way it came in, and they can leave it. They don't have to do, this isn't a dictation of any type. It's just a ballpark. Rents, I put up to 300. They haven't come with a fresh proposal. They may before we actually end up going to the select board. The bus
I
shelters,
just have one broad question, which is, like, if we give the select, are we gonna give the select board these numbers? Is that our plan, or is this just for us?
well, so great question. We haven't decided that, and we don't have to, but here's where we are in the process. I wanted to look at these numbers so that we can have a conversation about how we move forward with our proposal to the select board. Because if we have napkin numbers, that helps us decide, can we propose all of these?
Sure.
Or not all of them?
Yeah.
So that's just sort of where I'm heading with this. And so whether we actually put numbers to it when we give it to the select board or not, I think it will be helpful for them if we do, such as it is whatever we have. But they may not be these exact numbers.
Yeah, I only worry because I just worry on some level, I don't want to send like a message that we're sort of tacitly approving. Like we think that an amount, like it
Yeah.
should get this much, whereas this should get that
Okay.
much. And I don't know if that's just a way that we convey the message.
Really know what that
because,
is requested.
That was like a pretty loose $100,000 increase, which might totally be justified. But if
Right.
it's 10% of our budget that we're like,
Yes.
yeah, we're gonna just do that as well. Like, I don't want that to be the message that necessarily it sends,
Okay.
right? I think giving them a sense of what it might cost and maybe just a disclaimer that
This is what-
ultimately
Yeah,
though.
exactly. Asked for or considered possible amount.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then they should.
And that,
And we can talk about the wording too of the
Yeah.
report to them.
perfect. Yeah, so I just wanted to
Great.
clarify there.
Porter, have you, did a quick edition of any of this?
Yes, that's
It's like,
that's down there at the bottom, which no, we've taken
Oh.
some things out and put some things in, but it's a little over 1.1 million. So
We only have 1.2, right?
we have 1.1.
Oh, 1.1.
so,
So
Anyway,
we're like 300,000.
yeah,
so bus shelters 15, then we took out that one, air conditioning for Holly Hall. I think the 50,000 was actually air conditioning for Holly Hall. We don't really know. Nobody has any idea.
I think that is it's some kind of an infrastructure thing,
Yeah.
but that would benefit the whole.
Yeah,
town. I mean,
okay,
yeah.
just keep going. Library outdoor classroom, that is a number from the library. Mason's elevator, that's a number from the Masons. Electric charging stations is an estimate of our matching grant for this state grant program.
How many is
Skate
that
park,
for?
what?
How many is
I
that
don't know.
for?
I don't know. Do you know?
No idea.
Can't remember.
Okay.
Or I don't think I ever knew, actually. Is that important, Rob? Do you want me to ask?
Well, I just curious, it was plural, so I was curious. And just want to know.
I will ask that question. The skate park, that says 15,000.
For a roof.
I think it was 150,000. 15,000?
No, that one, they were looking more in the 50 grand range. To resurface it and rebuild the structures.
That
of
would make sense.
Oh, I think this was just to like put in a little mini one for littler kids.
Yeah,
To
no,
resurface.
But
Yeah.
it's to repair what's there. And that's the
No,
ice
that's the
skating,
ice skating.
which I'd like to
We're talking
talk
about
about. 'Cause I have questions about that.
So I personally would like to see that number, just on our numbers here. 50 grand, I think, is a realistic number to
Mhm.
bring that park up to what they need. Because it needs to be, the entire thing needs to be resurfaced, almost all of the structures need to
To be
be.
rebuilt.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll change that to 50. The pedestrian path along Pine Street, we have no numbers.
So can I say something about that? So I thought that the committee, there's a pedestrian bike committee, and I thought
Advisory
that they were doing some work on that.
There was a study done, right? Wasn't there
Yes.
study on a sidewalk for
Yeah.
Pine Street?
That was the
Many years
Munsell,
ago.
that was the Munsell scope. and
No,
s-
no, that's a different,
There's
okay.
there's two.
they do them all the time. There's studies, scoping studies. There was a Munsell one. but
Okay.
there was one done for Pine Street.
Because I thought the idea was to have so I'm gonna, the wordage, I don't know. White lines. So that when cars come and you're walking in the.
Right, just like
path.
a pedestrian
Right, so is
area.
that what that is, or that this is something else in addition to that?
So what's, the theory behind it is, we're tearing up Pine Street next year,
Okay,
putting a water line in.
okay.
The town didn't budget to widen that road 6-8 feet. Instead of trying to figure out how to put a sidewalk down the road, if you widen that road 6 to 8 feet, then paint a pedestrian stripe. But there's no money in that project when they pave it.
And that
to pave the
project's
line.
already planned,
Yeah, and the
So-
project itself is paid for.
right?
So
So
I
you
know-
just
and-
need an extra bit of money.
And there was some pushback initially from Valerie on it, and then she's out at the moment, so. I felt that would be a very simple
Do you have any idea what a ballpark we could throw at that would be?
pavement is. And again, since they're repaving already. I mean, you're
100,000?
probably 100 grand. would
So
be a
here's
fair
the thing
number.
with that is, we did hear a lot about walking in town.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was at the dump that day, a lot of people talked
Yeah.
about walkers and, pedestrian path on Pine Street. The study said that to put a sidewalk on Pine Street was gonna be millions of dollars. So it got completely panned.
Right.
But now we have to do this water line work anyway, and if we could piggyback on that, so if we gave the select board a cherry, to sort of dangle as, look, when you're doing this already, because timing wise,
Now's when you do it.
right,
So we would just simply.
Yes.
You're just putting,
extra space,
Space.
just make it a little wider and then visually distinguish it. It's not gonna be a curb, it's not gonna be a sidewalk.
So that if a large truck was trying to get into, the
Bristol Works
Bristol
or- yeah.
Works. They still have the ability to use it. The other thing it hopefully would do would be those that are walking down that road.
yeah, keep them.
keep
Stay in one place.
corral them in one spot. I mean, I walk down that a few times a week. And you look down it and it's just like, bleh, of
Yeah.
people. It's like,
Yeah.
you all just, stay on one side of the road.
To what you're saying. I see. So the project is already happening. This is just to get a little,
Just a fine tuning.
just a
Right.
fine tune.
Take advantage of the
Interesting.
opportunity.
Well, I feel like that is something, I mean, there's so many people that are on Pine Street walking. It increases, it's
Okay.
such a good thing.
I'll add clarity, like, do something when you're putting in the water lines to make pedestrians safer.
Oh, yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds great.
There
Okay.
could be a different design on the paint job.
We threw in 5,000 for the farmer's market ag support. The accessibility on trails is blank. So from a Bristol Trail Network standpoint, I've been working for a couple of years on a 10-year plan to create genuinely accessible recreation paths on town properties. So where we are right now is, I had a very tentative study that regional planning did, looking at the parks that I was interested in. The next step is I'm working with a group at the state that has technical assistance money available for health equity. And that will probably then lead to an engineering study, which would then lead to construction estimates and then grants for doing it. So if there was going to be any money for this, it would be for an engineering study to evaluate multiple parks. I had one engineering study done at Memorial Park. It was about $5,000 or $6,000. So what do you think? $6,000 per park for an engineering study for accessible paths? Does that sound normal?
That would be probably close.
Okay, so $30,000 or $40,000 here would be construction. What do you call those?
Engineering study.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's just gonna be a study on it on the front end.
That's all it is.
Because that's all we can do, especially in the window we have.
Exactly.
Again.
Oh, yeah, we could never get to actual construction in our ARPA window.
Okay. But it would be somebody going out, looking at the land, surveying it, saying you need X, Y, and Z in order to make this more
Right, so you
accessible.
get an engineering design and then you can go to a contractor and say, give me a construction estimate to do this engineered
So
plan.
it's all the checks. that-
Exactly. That's
All
what
the
it's
boxes that
it's a
need.
10-year plan for
Well,
accessibility.
right.
Don't need a wheelchair anytime soon.
Okay.
So
So you're saying 40,000?
Yeah.
And,
Uh,
and that doesn't like commit us to an ongoing
No.
expense, but it also doesn't get us anything
That's
unless there is an expense.
That's a good point.
So I mean, again, I don't really know my thought. I think it's a great idea, frankly, but in the context of how we want to position this, like, if that's a necessary first step so that we can actually do that, and we
Right.
think that there's a chance people would actually do that, or the town would actually do that, or we could find grants to do that,
Right.
then it seems really valuable. But otherwise, it feels like it has the capacity of, we spent the money, we got the engineering study, that'd be amazing, but we don't.
Well, yeah, and one of the arguments of ARPA money for this is that getting engineering grants is utterly unsexy and there's no grant money available for it.
Yeah.
The fact that I got one grant thing for it was a glorious fluke. And the only reason was because Memorial Park is closed. And so this private foundation in Middlebury that has connection here was like, we'll fund that.
And it's one that needs to be upgraded.
Yeah.
That's a huge,
Well, this won't fix that problem.
I know.
So the PA for the 4th of July, which would hopefully be a mobile one that the town could use in other venues as well.
Yeah, I talked to Meredith. Was what their thoughts were, to replace their very aging rapid PA.
How much does it, would it cost?
7,500.
500 to do it all.
Oh, okay.
And then a message board, which could be somewhere in town, maybe fire station or maybe Walgreens Shaw's. There were different ideas that came in. Maybe $20,000.
Yeah, what we looked at it in the past.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the roof over the ice rink.
Please explain this to me.
Well,
Because of the snowfall, if we ever get one, people have to go over and shovel it. And so, you know, it falls to volunteers and people just wanted relief.
well, also when you
And
when you flood and you put ice down
Mhm.
and it freezes, so that's a really big volunteer effort. And
You don't want snow falling. on
it's
it.
not just the snow, it's the sun. So when the sun beats on it, you get melty spots.
Right.
So the ice gets wrecked. And if there were a roof over the rink, then it could be a pavilion space that could be used for a farmer's market in the
Yes.
summer, or it could have more 3-season use because now it's a covered space. So like think COVID, think
Yeah.
outdoor social distancing.
What type of circulation?
It's just a roof,
It's just a roof.
just a roof.
Yeah,
So there's
um,
still wind, there's still rain getting in
Exactly.
there.
sure.
So. all of
So,
that-
It would just be a pavilion.
it would just
But it would be
pavilion.
better than nothing. But I just need to say, this number is not a real number.
Cause wasn't it like 750,000 or 850,000 when we got a
What?
proposal?
Well, that was to do like a whole, like, oh, wait, did we get a proposal on this?
Yeah, way up, early on.
Really?
Was it to enclose the ice rink or to cover it?
Well, it might have been to include,
I think that was to enclose it,
maybe that's. what
but
it
the
was.
roof is still super expensive. It's not
Huh.
town property.
It
Well,
actually-
actually, is it registered? Don't even go there, but
Yeah, don't even start.
so it's a big chunk of money and it, for 300,000 relative to 300,000 for Wren's Nest, it's a hard sell. So this is one where I feel like it's very popular in the community.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm not sure that I, as an ARPA committee member, and I have to say I'm also on the rec club board, so hey, I'd love to take the ARPA money, but I'd rather see the grant writer go find other recreation ARPA money
Mhm.
than spend this ARPA money. But I just wanted to put that out there. So I'm wearing 2 hats on that one, but I'm actually not pitching it.
Yeah, and I'll get on my soapbox on the roof over the ice rink.
I was also on the rec club board once upon a time.
Yeah, for a long time, and maintained that ice rink for about 20 years. One of the biggest concerns with putting a roof, one of the nicest parts about an outdoor skating rink
Yeah.
is on those nice 20-degree sunny days, gorgeous. 20 degrees in the shade
Mhm.
on ice is just cold. In the wind over their house, so now you're just cold. So
Yeah.
that's been one of my biggest concerns with putting a roof over, is it changes the dynamic of what it is. It's an outdoor rink. Unfortunately, we poured a slab, we put up boards
Yeah.
20 plus years ago. And now we just need to figure out how to use it correctly.
And the last 2 winters, it actually got used a lot because the rec club worked in collaboration. The high school started clearing the snow for us, and the ELP program had volunteers who helped with the ice because they were using it. So hopefully that will continue. But does anybody want to make a motion to take this out, or Helen, Rob, Mike, Diane? Anybody want to lobby to keep it in?
I kind of liked the idea, but whatever.
I mean, I
It's
kind of
not
like the
important.
idea too, but not at
Yeah,
several $100,000.
yeah,
Well,
yeah. I'm shocked that it would cost that much to put a roof up.
my devil's advocate point of view is that at least it's going more towards the town than the Wren's Nest, which is pretty private, and it's gone
Right.
from the town.
That's true.
Only
although-
hoping to reap side benefits of them continuing to do business.
That's a good point.
Good point.
Yeah.
I- Although it's a lot of money for a roof that seems like it's mixed benefit apart from maintenance of the ice.
Maybe a committee could get together and.
We
build it.
have one. We have
Oh, yeah.
a committee. It's not, but yeah, I mean, I think.
You know, get all the carpenters in town to build it. You know, a roof raising. party.
That's a good idea. I'll take that to the rec club.
Well, again, this falls under like if there was a grant writer, then they could,
Coordinate.
perhaps find money for something like that.
I mean, I personally think we should just strike it at this point in time. I think it's a huge volume.
Do I hear a motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to strike the roof on the ice rink.
Anyone second?
Yeah, I'll second that with the idea that it kind of falls into that narrative
Narrative.
section. I think it's a really great idea, but I saw that number 2 and I went, ooh. And
I think that number's low.
I
yeah,
do too.
Any other discussion? Am I breaking any hearts here? Okay, all in favor of removing?
I,
Opposed? Okay.
Look at that, it brought our number back to 1.1.
Do you like that? Okay, the bike racks are super cheap. They should just do that in a heartbeat. Dog park, I think is already moving along. And so that price went down.
where
What was
would
the
it be?
price on it?
I don't know if it's a secret. Is it a
Oh,
secret?
okay.
Yeah,
Why is
it's
it
been
secret?
generally discussed.
In the
Okay,
village, somewhere around.
yeah, behind Howden Hall. It's already got a fence. It's a nice big
Yes.
grassy area. It's already on the mowing budget.
Yay.
So, yeah,
Excellent.
Yeah, there's the other spot that's been discussed many times. It's also been down on Basin Street, but if
that
that,
was my suggestion.
well, and I've said that for years, but and with the theory, what I
There's
like,
no parking down
what I
there.
like about Howden Hall is it's there, we can
So
prove the
close.
concept. And if it's used or it's not big enough, then we look at where do we,
An extra one, yeah.
where do we move to a new space and create a larger, so I think $5,000 to get it, the
Started.
fence,
Yeah.
the fence repaired.
Updated.
So tell me what the advantage is to having a dog park.
Your
What's the
dog can be off leash and can socialize with other
So,
dogs.
you know, we live in a rural state, we're surrounded by nature. People can take their dogs anywhere and let them
No,
run.
No, you actually.
Not in the village, not
No,
in the
but there's
town, but
leash laws, right? And they're,
Well, actually, Bristol doesn't have a leash law. Doesn't our law say that technically it needs to be under voice command?
I believe so.
But no, you can't take your dog anywhere. I
well,
mean,
I mean, that was a bad.
Yeah,
yeah,
that
I
was a
mean, like,
bad
so
statement,
like,
but there are
if you go,
many places to take dogs.
there are some
Not in
places.
towns and cities and villages, but
No, there are some places you can take dogs. But anyway, people who live in the village like having dog parks. Helen? I saw
No,
somebody
I think I like the idea of a dog park. I missed where you said it might be located. Nope, can't hear ya.
behind Howden Hall.
Do you know where Howden Hall is?
Yeah,
Yeah, so there's a grassy, what is it? Almost a third of an acre back there.
Rather
oh,
close to
it's
that.
tiny. Okay, so we're talking about a very small dog park.
You could throw a tennis ball, but your foxhound is not gonna have a lot of
it's
running.
perfect for small dogs.
Small and medium.
Wow. I would propose trying to find a bigger space. The proponent, whoever is advocating or proposing this.
I think that if we think a dog park is fine, we just leave it in there and that's not really our problem.
Yeah, I think the plan again is that they start with town hall, proof of concept, and if it isn't large enough, there are other opportunities in the community where they can,
And it might limit the dog poop at school playground where the kids are running
Rec
around
field.
in the rec field, in the park where the green, where the kids are running. And
You want to propose putting up dog food bag dispensers?
Oh,
Okay, so yes
Yes,
and no.
everybody.
So here's the issue with that. So when my daughter was in Pittsburgh, they have, her building is very dog friendly. And there's hundreds of apartments in the city. But they also have, just about every green space, there's a minimum of 2 dispensers everywhere, with trash buckets on the inside. They also have building maintenance goes out twice a day and empties the bucket. So that's the issue is, you put all the dispenser bags you want, and then people pick up their poop, they tie it off and set it right there at the bottom of it.
That's what we need game cameras. Who are those people? Like everybody in the world says, who are those people? But somebody must be that person. Have you ever met anybody in your life who would do that?
Yeah.
Private property, there was a spot, we were driving through to go out looking at some hunting stuff. And we noticed there was like 6 or 8 little dog poop bags on the corner of this person's property. And I'm like, and the people who own it, I'm like, they don't pick up it's their land. They just let their dog run free on it. And coming back through, there was a woman walking her dog and carrying her little bag and stopped and put it with her other ones. What are you doing? Well, I don't want to carry him all the way home. I'm like, so the landlord, I'm like.
What did she say?
Well, a lot of let me just run.
I will say that I've walked my dog and she's gone to the bathroom before our walk is finished and I've left my little bag, but I collect it and then bring it home with me.
Same here.
And I get it that like maybe you forgot one day, but anyway, okay, we digress.
Yeah, we did, sorry.
We're doing very well. Bus for rec department 35,000, that was on the
Do we
list.
want to vote on the dog park?
We don't have to vote. We're not voting on everything. I'm just telling you about the
Alright.
numbers. We're only voting if we take something off
Okay.
or change it.
Was that 35 from them?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, it seems cheap when a new pickup is 50,000, you know?
I can't remember, but for our ballpark napkin purposes, I think that's what they said.
Yeah, I believe so too.
And then we threw in $10,000 to support potential zoning changes to increase density, increase sewage and parking in the event that the planning commission needs additional money to extend their planning work. And that was our list, which brings us to something around $1 million. And again, we may or may not give these actual numbers to the select board, but the purpose of this exercise was, if we're good with this list right now, then I'm proposing that this is the list that we tidy up a little bit and send out to the community through Front Porch Forum in a ranking. So we can say, hey, everybody, thanks for all your ideas and support and input last summer. Here is the narrowed list of recommendations we're going to make to the select board. Please click here to put them in your preferred order. So they can take these 18 items and you, and all of our neighbors can on the form move them around. So you'll move them and put them in an order, and then we'll collate that. So we'll give this list to the select board and say, select board, here is the list of things we want you to fund with the ARPA money in the order that shows the collective ranking of community members who chose to weigh in. Please start at the top and work to the bottom. Anywhere where you can get other monies to support it and supplant it, roll the money down. But if you can't get other monies, fund it and then move down.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
100%.
No, it doesn't make sense. to
No,
me.
I think it does. I just didn't remember if we're totally set on like the instructions being, because people, this was the ranking of people, that was the prioritization that we thought the select board should also fall.
We don't have to. So I'm suggesting that we do this ranking and we look at the community's
I think
things.
that's
And then we can maybe massage it a little bit before we go to the select board. But
Yeah,
that's the gist.
yeah,
is
just
that's-
because it seems strange because I don't know exactly how many people will weigh in and.
Right, exactly.
and-
Everybody.
don't want
in
the
your
lo-
household.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think you're right. And I actually, and to your point, that's part of the reason why I did the yellow
Yeah,
is because
exactly.
I feel like, and I think that the other thing is that we might say to the select board, the yellow you have to do. And then like, for crying out loud, buy the bike racks, right? You know, like take the little things and be like, just knock it off. Like, don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah,
And it was so yeah, that's what we'll talk about next month.
perfect, yeah. Then I have no concerns.
Which leads us very nicely along our agenda is, so we've discussed the list. That's our process to collect public input. And if you guys are good, I'll just take this list and I'll do that. And that'll go out on Front Porch Forum
Nice.
in 2 weeks, and we'll get that, or a week, and we'll get that back and have that. And then the only other thing I had before we hear from Jessica's students is, one thing on this. So remember that the amount, so it came out to around $1 million or so. I just want to put this idea out there, and you guys can be like, no, or, oh, interesting, or yes, absolutely. Bristol has $1.1 million. You guys probably read the article in the Addison Independent, right? Bristol doing much more engagement with the community than any other place. Our select board, bless their little hearts, has sat on the money and not spent it out from under us, and has been very, very patient, which other select boards have not even considered being.
Yeah.
They may have some priorities or thoughts that aren't reflected in any of this information. And I had an idea, which is, what if we said to them, Bristol has $1.1 million. Point one, y'all have at it.
Oh,
Do what you want to do. Take $1 million and do this. It's just a thought.
well, I think we should address that issue, because I have this fear that we're going to give them their recommendations and then they'll just do what they want.
I don't think they
And that's
will.
what the people
because
have
there's
said to me in the community is,
Yeah,
what difference does it make? They're gonna do what they want. They'll put
I
it.
don't think they will, because there's
I
too
mean,
much.
like everybody on the select board, and I don't think
No,
that's gonna happen.
Oh,
but
I've seen it happen, but I don't think they will here, because there's been a lot of visibility.
Mhm.
We did that, like we created that visibility, and not just in town, but also through the county. So I think that they've gotten kudos for their process. In i.e., they got kudos for letting us do our work. And I think that that would be a little more egg on theof face than, I don't think they will. And if they do, we'll scream and yell. But I would be willing to sort of have a part of that money. It's just a thought. Anyway, I'm curious, Rob, Helen,
So point
Well,
one is 100,000?
100,000.
I think the values that are in the chart in column D, many of them are approximates, and they may come out to be more. And if we give, quote unquote, give the select board whatever, $100,000 to do whatever they want with, we may find that, oh, well, now we can't afford the bike racks and whatever.
That could be.
Just because these are approximations, I hate to bind up the other money, which would mean then having to redo this list because we have to eliminate stuff because we can no longer afford it. I mean, I understand your rationale, and it'd be really nice to know what the select board is thinking, if they already have a list in their minds and they're just hoping that the items that they want are also on our list. I have no idea.
Well, I've asked Valerie that several times since we started with this search, and it sounds like not dramatically so, and they were all encouraged to participate in our process. So, you know, they had the opportunity in any meeting to tell Valerie an idea, to ask to tell me the 2 times I went, to send a postcard or tell us or go to thing. And the only one who did, to my knowledge, is the kid. And the only thing that I think feel really strongly about that I'm aware of that's not on this is that the town financial management system and some of its software systems are really, really directly out of date. And that's not a sexy project that makes this. I can't remember what the things were. I mean, if you remember any.
You guys, I can't hear much of anything that you're saying. You're coming in and out. The sound tonight has been pretty awful. I don't know what's different about previous meetings versus tonight. And Rob, are you having trouble?
Can we check our plugs?
It's not, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah.
Well, it's different than usual. Well, proceed. I mean, sure. I heard about 10% of what Porter said in response to what the select board is planning to do.
It's plugged in,
I'll repeat what I said is, I don't think that they had a whole lot of ideas that aren't on our list already somewhere. The only one that I know of was the idea of updating the town's financial management and IT system.
Right, and again, where I was gonna go. Having done software implementation, there's no way they will implement a brand new financial software package of the scope and scale they need before this money's due.
Okay.
That's a 2-year project.
Sure.
I've done this did that for a long time.
I was just going to.
My thought is that we should not do that. It kind of goes against what we're doing here. If you want to address it, first line of whatever they're presented with should be, this committee acknowledges the select board is not beholden to anything on this list or anything we say, and let that be the caveat, but just say, here's the list of what we present.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. I like that approach. Porter, I fully understand where you're coming from, and I think in an ideal world, that's a great solution, but I fear it might come off as sort of presumptuous that we get to dictate something that maybe we don't.
Yeah.
Right. And I would worry that it wasn't our charge, and I'd hate for them to leave with a sour taste in their mouths, in the sense of like, they did open this up, they appointed the committee, like they engaged in the process. And so maybe to have that line that says, we realize that you're not, but we really encourage you to stick with this process that you set up, might be a way to just keep that goodwill going, so that maybe they do something like this again the next time there's a big decision to be made.
There was just so much data that was collected,
Yeah.
so much work that went into this. And then I think it's just going to be so great to put it out there to the community again, because I feel like I talked to somebody today, they're like, when are we going to hear anything else about it? And I said, it's coming. You're going to have a say, like you're going to be able to like organize your top choice to your bottom choice. Really? Are you sure? And I was like, yes, it's going to happen. So I think people are going to be really excited about this opportunity again to have a say in their town's government. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll talk in March about the way we present this information to the select board. I'm envisioning that there will be a written report with all of the lists and links to the raw data itself, so that they can look at that way. And I'll get the ranking thing out. And that's it for our agenda stuff. And then we'll hear from Jessica's class.
Great. I think you need to allow me to share screen, and I will show you what we found.
Okay, let me stop my share. I think I just need to make you a host.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way.
I get so distracted by that.
You now host
Okay.
this.
Yep. Okay. So we presented these findings to the Bristol Select Board. So they have seen these results. And basically what we did was we just shared with them, how we basically collected this data. And, I have to point out that we did this during a semester. So it was fast, about like 6 weeks worth of work. And also we weren't able to really try to get a large response rate. We, sent reminders and things like that, but we just sort of had to take what we could get. So with those caveats in place, we tried to figure out with a survey of citizens in Addison County, select board members in Addison County, and then a deep dive with interviews with select board members in Middlebury, Bristol, Virgins, and Weybridge. And then we also talked to people like the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They have Katie, their ARPA person. So we tried to gather all these sources of information to answer this big question about how are select board members making decisions about spending ARPA money, and is there a role for public participation in these decisions? And so you all know this data, but it's amazing. Some of the select boards are still really struggling just with the process. So this is the larger process. And what we saw was that most towns have done what Bristol did. Bristol did it first, but the other towns all did the same thing where they sort of rolled that money into their budgets as revenue replacement so that they don't necessarily have to account for all of the ARPA spending. So what we found was both Middlebury and Virgins have sort of taken the approach of this money is now in our budget and we're just going to decide how to spend it in the same way that we decide how to budget, right? So it's just yet another revenue stream and there's nothing really that special about it. And so what Middlebury has done is they have already put that money in their town budget. Public Works is using it on their budget requests, and there's nothing special there, right? So it's just for whatever their normal expenses would be. One thing that they did decide, though, was that they had pulled a little bit of money out for Maple Broadband. But again, you can see these are all infrastructure, public works funding that they're using this money for. For Virgins, they had originally decided that they wanted to do that, but they since, I don't want to say it's because we have been talking with them a lot, but they are discussing creating a framework like you all have created, like a matrix, trying to talk about what would their goals be, how should they spend this money. And originally they were saying they didn't want public participation, but now they're saying that maybe they would like that. So we'll see when we talk to them on January 10th what they want to do in the future. But basically what they were saying is something similar to what Middlebury Select Board was saying, which is we primarily view this money as part of our budget. It's going to go for infrastructure. But in Virgins, they're also saying more of what you all are saying, which is, can we get something more out of this funding rather than just another sidewalk or you know, whatever a normal expense would be? Is there something special, some special harm from COVID that we should be able to use this money for? One thing that they're worried about, which you all have been grappling with, is how to prioritize this. There's a lot of things to spend money on. This isn't actually a large source of money if you think about all of the other things they need to fund, like, you know, their water district expenses and all of these things. So they're worried about, how do you prioritize this money? Do you want the money to cover just one thing, or would it just be small amounts of money going for other things? And they're also worried that if they don't commit the money soon with the pace of inflation, that they're actually losing money by sitting on it. So there's also a little bit of time pressure that they're feeling there. So that's where they are right now. And so far, their city manager has proposed a framework for trying to make these decisions. And in the next meeting, they're also going to talk about if they want to get any sort of public input. Weybridge wants public input, but they're really not sure how to get it. And they're also not sure how they want to make these decisions. What they've done so far is they have set aside money for Maple Broadband. They're thinking about Turning Point requests, but Turning Point has also put in requests to get the opioid settlement money that the state's getting, which will also go to the municipalities. And so they were concerned maybe that since Turning Point will have access to other funds that other things wouldn't, that they didn't necessarily want to use ARPA money for Turning Point if they're going to be, you know, giving the money through these other sources. So they haven't decided how they want to move forward with ARPA money at all. And then for Bristol, you all already know all of this information, so we don't have to go through it. But Bristol is the one that has really taken the lead in trying to figure out what sort of priorities we have, how the money should be spent. You know, does it cover one thing, or is it just seed funding for lots of things? And what's the role of public input? And we've collected a lot of public input. So that's sort of, if you think about it on a spectrum, you can see Middlebury's on one end and Bristol's on the other, as far as what is the role of public participation, and should the money be spent on anything special or just go into the budget. So that's what we saw. And again, these were all interviews with select board members. So these are the people who are the decision makers. Then what we did was surveys to try to see a little bit more of patterns. And you can see here that that citizens in Addison County are represented in the blue bars, and the decision makers, the select board members, are in the orange bars. And you can see that there are gaps. So when we're asking people, how should this money be spent? You know, what should it be spent on? You can see that the select boards are saying infrastructure, right? That they think that the money should be spent on infrastructure, but that's not the first choice of most citizens. They're really concerned about affordable housing. They're concerned about childcare. They're concerned about other areas in their life where they have either had more harm due to COVID, or maybe just that these things were already not working that well and COVID laid that bare. Right. So they're looking for special kinds of funding. They're not necessarily looking for this money just to be part of the infrastructure budget. So that's an interesting thing, is that there's a gap in people's ideas about what the money should go for between select board members and average citizens. We also asked community members what kind of harm they had specifically from COVID, so what they experienced. And you can see that a lot of people either lost jobs or lost income, but you can also see that they really struggled with childcare, healthcare, broadband, you know, all of these different issues. And so there were real harms from COVID, and a lot of these things overlapped. So in the question, we also let people sort of write in some answers for us, and they pointed out things like, even if you lost your job, or one parent lost their job, or you were losing income, like let's say you're a service worker and all of a sudden you're only working 2 days instead of 5, you couldn't stop paying for childcare, because then you would lose your spot and it would go to somebody else, and then you'd be on these long waiting lists. So even though you didn't currently have a job, if you plan to work again, you needed to keep paying for that spot. And so a lot of these harms weren't just one thing, but they actually interacted with each other to create some pretty challenging situations for people. So these were the harms then that people were reporting. So when we then turn to this question about public participation, on the left is the select board survey results, and on the right is the citizen survey. And so for the select board, you can see that they're saying, you know, we think that public participation is sometimes or mostly important, but not for every decision, and it's not the most important thing. So it has a role to play, but, you know, isn't hugely important. So this is the one about public participation. And then for the citizen survey, we asked about, you know, how effective is the town in getting public opinion for the distribution of these ARPA funds? And you can see that this sort of matches in that the select board doesn't necessarily think that public participation is all that important, and people feel that, right? So they're saying that, you know, public outreach about ARPA funding is not very effective. So they don't necessarily feel like the town's trying to collect information from them.
Jessica, do you have a breakout on that for Bristol? Did we get better scores?
We did get better scores, but the trends are the same. And so when we then asked, the select board members about where in the process should public opinion be used, which might be important for the surveys that you're thinking about as well. What we found is that really it's this sort of passive idea of public participation. So the select board thinks that people should be updated about what the select board's discussing, but not necessarily that there should be any other outreach other than that, right? So there should be regular updates as part of the agenda, but not any specific outreach. And so then the last question we asked that I'm going to cover here was the outreach from the select board to the public. Again, you can see that on the left-hand side is the select board survey. On the right-hand side is from citizens. And so we were asking them again, you know, what sort of outreach are you doing? And you can see that it's that passive outreach of it's a line item on every select board agenda. So Middlebury, Virgins, all of them, they have a line item on every single select board agenda, 5 minutes discussion of ARPA funding, and there's supposed to be updates there. And so that's the type of outreach that the select board is doing. And so then when we ask people, how many updates are you hearing? I guess this is what Ali was communicating too, right? Is that they don't feel like there's a lot of information. No one really knows if the money has been spent or what's happening with the process. So the public doesn't feel all that engaged in the process. So the recommendations then that we had from this idea about how are you deciding and then what is the role of public participation is one is also to try to figure out more about the specific harms of COVID. So not just necessarily what people want money spent on, but also what were the specific harms that they felt from COVID. And that this could help us address that mismatch that we see between the select board and citizens about what the priorities are. Most average people aren't saying that, during COVID, the harm they felt was that their sidewalks weren't good, right? And so that's sort of the challenge that we're seeing. And that even if this public input doesn't change the decisions that the select board are making, it would increase a lot of public trust in the process. We also asked people if they had shared ideas, and in the survey, only a few residents said that they had shared opinions. And so doing more public outreach might be valuable. One thing that we were wondering is, there's only so many people that you can reach through Front Porch Forum, and would there be benefit in maybe trying to send survey cards like home in the kids' Friday packets from the school, right? Or enlisting other entities inside of the town to try to do more outreach so that we get more opinion during the ranking part of the survey. And then the other thing that we found is that, if the select board could try to have more active communication rather than just adding it to the agenda, but actually trying to talk about how they're making decisions, that we thought that not only would this be helpful for spending COVID money, but it also would probably increase a lot of trust in the town government. So we found that a lot of citizens were saying that they they didn't necessarily think that the select board would make the best spending decisions. So there was very low trust that the select board would spend the money well. Most people thought that they just spend it on whatever their pet projects were. And so again, that sort of active outreach, I think, would be really important. Even if it doesn't necessarily change people's minds, I think it would increase trust a lot. And so again, you all are already on the side of the spectrum where you're doing most of these things, unlike the other towns that were part of this research. So this might not be as useful to you as say some of the other select boards, because you're already doing a lot of this. I guess interpreting these results for the specific case of Bristol would be to, in this last stage of getting people to rank all of these suggestions, would be to try to do broader outreach more than just Front Porch Forum, to try to explain what is the process, what is the goal, and to try to collect information, with the idea that this public outreach then would, make people trust that they're part of the process and feel included more. Before I stop sharing, were there any slides that I should go back to that anyone wants to see in more detail? Otherwise, I can stop sharing.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, hopeful.
Yeah, and so it was a pretty amazing process with the students. Again, we had limited time, and so there are lots of things, like if we could do around 2 or 3, I have lots of suggestions for them, but they did a great job. And what was really fascinating for me was to see how much they learned. So they really learned the personalities of these different towns. They also discovered some tensions between the idea of being a native Vermonter versus moving here. And they were like, what is that? Is that a thing? So they'd also discovered They discovered a lot of interesting things. And then also the idea that there's a little bit of competition between towns. Like a lot of people were saying like, oh, well, what's Middlebury doing? What's Bristol doing? So they also learned, I think, a lot about Addison County, which is great. So I hope what they found was helpful for you guys, even though you're sort of on the far extreme of that spectrum.
I would think they also learned a lot about how town governments work, like the role of the select board, which they probably knew nothing about before they started this project.
Yes, they knew nothing about that. And they really enjoyed learning, although they were exposed to a lot of politics, like internal politics. I think they thought the select board was like a professional body, right? Where you could talk to one member and they represent everyone. And they had some interesting conversations, like, you know, they talked to, so in Virgins, they were talking to one group of city councilors, and then they talked to another group, and they thought that everyone was thinking like, oh yeah, public participation would be great. And then they sort of got an earful about the citizen advisory board for the police department in Virgins, and that citizens, you know, don't really need to be sharing their opinions because they vote, and that's when they get to share their opinions. So it was sort of interesting as they waded into all these local politics, and they realized that there were these things like right beneath the surface that they had never noticed before.
So before I ask my serious question, did they characterize the vibe, or you said they got the identities of each of the towns? Like, what was Bristol's vibe? Like, what did they put a adjective to us?
They loved Bristol, but what they also found that was sort of funny is that so Darla and Ian were really happy to talk to them individually, and then everyone else in the select board said, you just have to talk to Ian. He's the chair of the select board and he'll represent, you know, our opinions. And so they were worried, you know, that they were getting two people's opinions instead of more select board members' opinions. So that was one concern they had. And they were like, why do only two of them want to talk to us? But then they also loved Bristol because they said they felt like everybody on the committee was really trying, you know, in a lot of areas they talked to people and they didn't know what to do. They hadn't thought about it. They were just sort of waiting until the deadline to decide how to spend that money. And they felt that Bristol was being really thoughtful and trying to include lots of people. Plus they loved Chris. So that was their favorite moment.
Well, and everybody on this committee is Karen. Great. So the question I have is, you know, I feel like you know, when I think of myself in those bar graphs, for me, the public participation was the main thing all last summer and into the early fall. For the ranking, I don't feel like that's as important as a participation piece. It's more of we're circling back and we're giving people a chance to weigh in, and we want them to see where we're coming from and be ready to hear where we're going. So I'm not inclined to, you know, to do a mailing or to stand at the dump and do all that again. But I was thinking, and Ali actually said she wrote a note here on the paper, town meeting. So like, we're not planning to make our recommendations to the select board. Do we want to wait until town meeting and have town meeting be a place where we announce sort of our process and our progress and invite the rankings there? Or do we want to just go ahead and do it on Front Porch Forum, get something maybe in By the Way for the Addison Independent, put it back on our webpage, and you know, let people do what they're going to do from a timing standpoint.
I mean, I think it's up to you how you want to move forward. What we seem to hear from a lot of people was that they felt that the select board already had ideas in mind, and that that they either weren't sure that the select board would listen to their ideas. So what was the point of participating? Or it also seemed like people just weren't really sure what the idea should be. I think we saw that reflected in the survey, like people wrote topics, but they didn't necessarily write ideas. And so, you know, a lot of people, we had a couple of open comment questions in the survey, and a lot of people said, you know, I don't have an idea. Like, I don't know what to tell. I know what the problem is, but I don't know how to tell them to fix it, right? Like, I don't have an idea. And so I think in some ways the ranking might be easier for people who didn't share an idea because they didn't know one, or they just wrote housing on a postcard. You know, maybe seeing ideas and ranking them might also get them to participate in a different way. And I don't know if it would be a challenge. I mean, you know, maybe the town meeting would be great, but I know that, you know, through the school, they send out mailings about all kinds of different things that come home in those Friday folders, their community stuff, just all sorts of things. And so I didn't know if it would be possible to either, you know, stick a postcard in those folders, or like Jenny at Bristol Elementary School, you know, she just sends it out over the email list, but it goes to all the parents. And so they might choose not to do it, but it might be good outreach saying, you know, we've heard a lot of your ideas and we've narrowed it down to this list. And, you know, we really want to know what matters to you, what you think the priorities are. A lot of the participation that we found wasn't so much people feeling like they wanted an active role. It was just the idea that they felt like somebody cared what the harm was, and, you know, that we're trying to help them and that there was a process. And I think sometimes that, you know, we're all really involved and so we know what's going on, but for a lot of people, they just don't hear anything and they just don't know. And so it's hard sometimes when, you know, I talk to the select board and they're saying, we hold these meetings, they're on Zoom, they're recorded, you know, there's lots of ways to find out this information. I think it's just hard sometimes for people to know where to go to look, or, you know, feel that they can take time from their days. You know, there's just lots of barriers. And so if there's anything that we could do to lower those barriers a little bit, I think it might be worth it. Not to make a whole bunch of work for us, but if there's like an easy way to do that, it might be good.
I think that's great. And we can certainly add that. So we can send it out, Front Porch Forum, the email at the school, by the way, at the paper, and put a link on our website.
And they can also push it out to whatever social media they're using still as
Who?
well. The town. I know Val's out, but
Okay,
I think Ian has access to that now.
okay.
And if there's a link too, like on our social media, like individually, right? We can have a link.
We could.
Well, so what,
As long as it's Bristol.
well, what the hope is that Bristol would start that. It would be,
Okay.
it'd be on the Bristol Facebook page.
Okay,
Okay.
And then we
can
could share that out. from
okay,
there.
got you. Okay,
How I would
Yeah.
prefer to see that.
sure. Okay.
And again, it's not a binding, it's just a ranking.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And
Yeah. Because we may get it and go, ooh, that's not even close to where we were headed.
But if we're in the ballpark of 1.1 million, then
Yeah.
and the select board will do what they're gonna do.
Right.
Do you have any other ideas for us or recommendations at this point, Jessica, based on our process? Or
I don't think she heard you.
No, I
Just-
did. Sorry. I was looking at my notes and then clicking back over to unmute myself. So I think, you know, just having the simple question about the forced ranking for your topics that you would come up with, I think that that's a great way to go. That keeps it really simple. If you wanted to have one other item, you could ask about, you know, the ranking of harm from COVID. So if you think about presenting your list to the select board, to not only say, you know, these are the things that the public supports in addition to what we support, but also if you could tie it to specific harm, right? Like, you know, 55% of the people who took the survey said that this was, you know, the biggest impact that they had from COVID. So that might be a way to encourage them to spend the money in those ways, again, because that's what the fund is supposed to be for. It's COVID relief money.
so Jessica, are you imagining that question, would the harm from COVID would be tied to each of the items on the thing, or be an open-ended question about harm to COVID, or a completely different question about harm from COVID?
Yeah, so I was thinking maybe that you would have the question 1, which is, please rank order these 20 or 15 or however many suggestions that you have. And, we can have them sort of grab it and drag it and get their list in order. So that would be their prioritization. And then we can see, how many % pick X as their first choice or whatever. And then the second question could be, select all the harms that you had from COVID. I wouldn't do an open question because somebody has to tabulate that. I would just put in categories of harm maybe, and then let people pick the categories that apply. If you want to be fancier than that, you could also, once they pick those categories, in the next question, you could say, rank order them. Like, what was the biggest harm to the smallest harm that you suffered? So I don't know how precise you want to be. I mean, I think just having them pick the categories of harm might be enough.
So the categories could be taken from your bar chart of lost income, lost job, whatever.
It could be, or they could be keywords from your 15 or 20 items, right? Transportation, childcare, housing, mental health, substance abuse. So you could.
I am a little worried that the major damage that COVID did was job loss and reduced income. We're not proposing anything that solves that as a problem. So I don't want to set up some sort of discord where they're saying, well, here's what happened to me, but and you want to put a roof over the skating rink and whatever.
Right, exactly. And so that's why you might just want to use keywords from each one of the items. The only reason that I think that a question like that might be useful, I don't think it would be useful for your purposes as the committee, but it might be good evidence to sort of put behind your suggestions to the select board. And if it's not, you don't use it, right? But if it helps your case, then you would have it to add in. If it doesn't help in any way and is just extra, it doesn't really matter.
Does the committee want me to work with Jessica to come up with that second set of questions, or do we want to just keep it simple and just have people direct rank?
I like the idea of having that data to support.
I do too. I mean, and Jessica's right. If they disagree completely, then we just don't use it. I mean, it's unfortunate that clearly we aimed wrong. We're not going to help the people who were most hurt by COVID, but
let me see then if Jessica and I can put our heads together this week, maybe before classes start for you, Jessica, and we'll come up with a draft and I'll send it to the committee and they can all play the game and we'll see how that pans out. And then we'll reset and send it out to the community next week.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So is this tool computer-based we're talking about?
It is.
So I have to say, there's a lot of people who don't have computer access or don't want to, or don't know how, or whatever. So what are we going to do about that?
Thank you for bringing up Betsy's point. I'm not planning to do anything about it, just to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I feel like this is more of a reaching back out and talking to people about what we've already done rather than last summer, I was like, we can't not do it several different ways because we have to try to get ideas from everybody. But now I don't know how to do that in the winter. And I think that it's less important because I think that our recommendation to select board is going to be, please fund all of these if you can. I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, but I'm feeling a little bit more on the expediency and efficiency side than on the engagement and outreach side at this point of the
Well, what made me think about it was when Jessica said, or somebody, I think Jessica said, we're going to send it home in the Friday folder from school. And that made me think, okay, that's parents. What about elderly? What about, who's going to say, what do you think? That's what we're asking them. What do you think? And this is what we did.
Well, my thinking about town meeting was simply here's the document with the information for you to get onto your phone or to get onto your computer. So it wasn't like I was thinking that we would have a presentation, like a person to person. I don't know. It's a really great question.
To have at town meeting a display or a poster that says here's what we did, here's where we are, here's what we're
Yep, that
recommending.
would be a good thing.
But it wouldn't, I'm not imagining that town meeting piece being asking for more information.
Okay.
That's more saying, here's what we've done.
Okay.
This report will be made to the select board this month,
Mhm.
and then
It
people
could be
can.
a simple statement at the bottom that says, if you have comments, call one of these people.
Or at this point,
I don't want, I mean,
The other thing too, is, I mean, we're looking at sort of a ranking of what, or sort of a prioritization from the public. So back to the town meeting, poster board concept. I don't need all 20. What is the number one thing that, the quick down and dirty way to get it is, what's your number one concern? Go put a check mark. Do the cute little
like
sticker thing.
like an interactive game.
oh,
Almost. Yeah, so it's
Nice.
a poster board and there's a pile of stickers. You've seen the little dots.
Yes.
okay, done, and then we've done that. Oh,
That's a good idea.
And that way we can sort of kind of,
Call it dot
that way it gets the
thing.
heck out of it all together.
So we'd have the items,
We have a whole list.
have the whole list, and they can put a check mark next to.
Or
Or just
Whatever.
stickers. Yeah, little dots, little stickers.
Yeah.
We'll give- There's, they can take a dot and stick it up. What's your,
What is your, what's your
Your number
next
Number
one?
one.
that's a nice one. I love that.
Because then we are reaching out to more people and it feels like we're,
Yeah,
I like
but
that
see,
idea.
What I love about that, Chris, is that it's doing exactly what I want to do, which is we're giving people a reason to take a minute and look at it, right? So we don't need to ask them for new ideas. And we don't need to promise them that we're going to do whatever they say.
Right.
What we're doing is giving them a way to play with it. So it's about engagement. So we're giving them an opportunity to sit and look at it and think about it and maybe talk to their neighbor. Where they put the dot, whether they put the dot,
Right.
if they cheat and put 3 is not the point.
and at the bottom.
It's about engagement.
Yeah, and at the bottom, it's like, if you'd like to get more into more detail, here's a link to the.
The report.
Yeah.
Yeah, they will put the report,
That's
and
great.
we can have the report on our website by then.
And maybe even in a mailer that Jenny would send out, that I asked her to send out. And even Front Porch Forum, that we would let people know that this is going to be an opportunity for them so that they can look for it there.
Maybe we can drive people to town meeting.
Oh, there we go.
I would be
You
more
know-
inclined to sort of do that as a second when we get closer to
Yeah.
town
Oh,
meeting.
yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, hey, be looking.
That's a
looking
good
for-
point,
yeah.
separate it, because the
Right.
ranking is a
Right.
different tool. We're gonna
Yeah.
do the ranking actually in 2 weeks. So
Right.
that's gonna
Yeah.
happen before February.
And what'll be
And then this
interesting
will
is,
happen in March.
what it'll also give us is 2 comparisons. So
Yeah,
the
data.
town meeting project said, everyone wants us to focus on these 3 things. Online, it was these 3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
Okay,
and our housing and
Yeah.
childcare are these 3,
Right.
and then the select board can take that and scratch their heads.
exactly.
Great. Look at us.
That's fun.
What a committee.
Great. All right. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
When are we gonna meet?
Motion to thank Jessica for all her work and all of her students' work to gather this information. That was great.
Great. That was
Yeah.
really a great
I feel
report.
super lucky that we have you in our town.
Mhm.
Yes, our next meeting, Chris, will be the first Tuesday of February, which is
Tuesday,
the
Monday.
Monday, thank you. First Monday of February, which is the 6th, 7 o'clock here, unless the select board does something weird, but that's our plan.
7.
Thank you.
7 on the 6th.
Okay,
That is my daughter's due date, so I may be there and I may not. We'll see.
Was it the first time?
Sorry, can't hear you.
Get the first baby?
Yep. Sorry, I really.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone. Jessica, you're still hosting. You need to cancel, you need to stop the meeting, okay?